Hope everybody out there is doing well. Last week I saw this on Craigslist. It seems like these amps tend to come in waves. Last year this wasn't even on my radar, and now, I keep hearing about Skylarks. I saw Rhett Shull had a video a while back about how he loves small amplifiers. So, I've been sort of keeping my eye out for something like this, and when I saw this thing come on, it's cosmetically pretty rough, but the price was hard to beat. Less than $150, and you may be able to tell it's missing a foot back there. And I made a Fender Vibrachamp kit from Mojotone. I really liked it, but I don't seem to get that kind of breakup at low volume that I like, and it just seems to be a problem with the design of the circuit. I can't seem to get enough in the front end, so I thought I'd try this one out. I happen to have a replacement set of tubes just in the tubes I had lying around for my dad, all except for the 6EU7, and I think I can find one of those if I look a little bit harder. So let's take a look at this thing and see what it's going to need. Okay, sorry about the glare there, but the front panel looks basically very pitted, and the crest that made this thing called the crest line is in pretty bad shape. There's some pretty bad rust right there. I'm not sure. I'm trying to get out of the way of the glare. So the front panel and the knobs are rough. In fact, the number for number one input is completely rubbed off except for one little dot. It is, it's hard to read, so I'll just read it. It's 765941 is the serial number. This is not an original handle, and I do not know what you might call those, but they look like nails, honestly. Probably what they are is they probably sheared off the pins for the rivets that originally went in there. So as far as the Tolex itself, see it's completely coming loose there. Somebody decided that staples were a good idea. I guess maybe was glue just too much of an ask? I don't know. A little bit of rust there. Certainly nothing that can't clean up. I have plugged it in and it does work, but I haven't actually looked in the back yet. And the only reason I plugged it in was because the guy said that he had plugged it in before, not too long ago, to make sure it worked. And sadly, as you can tell, the logo is completely shot. All right, and here's the back. And that back panel will come off, and there's a couple of nuts that you have to address from the inside, reaching up inside here, and then it will come out, and then you slide the chassis out the front after you remove the tubes and disconnect the speaker. As you can see down there, the cord is long enough where you can go play at your neighbor's house and not even have to unplug it from the looks of it. And as you can see down there, it does have the original Gibson speaker. So let's get the back panel off and see what it looks like inside. All right, so the back panel comes off, and there are those two bolts I was talking about there that, as you can see, go into the back there, and then are attached with two nuts that are down here. I will reattach those, and down here you can see the speaker leads have actually been soldered to this original speaker. A lot of rust there, and so we're going to have to unsolder that to remove the speaker. Apparently you have to remove the baffle too. There, and there, and then this thing will slide out once you remove the tubes. The tubes are extremely loose. And I'm applying zero pressure there, and they are just wiggling all over the place. So I really do not want to be replacing a bunch of tube sockets. So I might try and tighten those pins up with just a small jeweler's screwdriver or something like that. So what I'm going to do right now is desolder the speaker leads, remove the speaker baffle, and then come back and we'll take a look at the chassis. It does look like somebody's been in here before. While I'm waiting for the soldering iron to heat up, as you can see, that is a F&T cap from Germany. It certainly didn't exist in the 1960s. This one looks new as well, and as I peek back there, I see a big blue electrolytic. I see a Sprague. I see something else. Looks like the input, maybe a bypass capacitor there, or coupling capacitor rather. And then looks like we got a Bumblebee or a Black Beauty there still. It looks maybe original. There's a big power resistor, carbon copper power resistor, and that one appears to have been replaced too. So it looks like somebody went in here and replaced the coupling capacitors, at least some of them, and the power supply capacitors as well. And like I said, there's a lot of this, you know, that's just green residue there, but there's this yellowish residue that I'm going to try and get a better angle on once we pull this out, and it'll be interesting to see. You see it on this metal here. I'm guessing, I mean, we're in a pretty arid climate here, so I'm guessing this thing may not have been spent most of its life here. But anyway, I'm sure the soldering iron's warm by now, so let me disconnect that. Alright, so now I've got the front baffle out, which will allow me to slide this right out. I disconnected the speaker. One of the leads actually just came right off as I was soldering it, and it looks like they need to be redone entirely. That's some really light gauge wire. You can see they put the 3-prong cord in. Well, I mean, I guess that works. I'm not sure I would have done it, and not really convinced that it's the way I'm going to leave it. But anyway, let's go ahead. I'll show you the tubes real fast here. I pulled out the tube since I had to get the chassis out. So that's probably the driver tube there. That's the 6EU7. There's the 6C4 phase inverter. And then the 6X4 rectifier. And then the two 6AQ5 tubes. They use 6BQ5s a little after this. And before that they used 12AX7s and 6V6s, as I recall. So I stopped looking after I found about 10 of them, but there's 6AQ5As, all, that one's from 1957, 1958, 1958, and 1973. Wow, that's a recent one. And let's see, they're the 6C4s if I want to replace the phase inverter. There's just a 7025 that I found that I always want to grab those when I see them. And then there's a 6X4 rectifier, new one that I got. And that looks like another one. And then this is probably, who knows what this is. That's just another 7025. Like I said, whenever I am going through my tube stash and I find 7025s, I grab them. They're a little harder to find. So anyway, and there's just a couple of random power tubes. So let's go ahead and pull this thing out and see what we can see what else is, what other magic awaits us. I realize it was a little out of the camera shot there, so I thought I'd do a little bit of shaky camera work here. So there's the power transformer. As I said, there are the new caps that have been put in. And see what I mean about this yellow residue? Can't even remember what the word I'm looking for is, but it's definitely there. Just corrosion of some kind, but I've seen green. I've never seen this kind of bright yellowish green. I mean, I've seen ski pants that look that color, but I've really never seen pieces of metal. There's the famous tone-sucking capacitor that you hear so much about that Brad, the guitologist, hates. We'll have to see if we want to remove that. plugging in the instrument just to see if it worked. I've got some dirty contacts to deal with. The pots are surprisingly not that dirty. I shouldn't say pots, there's really only one. It's a pretty simple circuit, as you can see from just looking at it. Filaments are barely twisted. So it'll be interesting to see how much hum we get here. This is either, I mean, it's got to be point-to-point wiring from the factory for the most part. And it looks like the installation of the power caps was not done badly. And you know, I don't know, it seems somewhat recent. Let's look at the date on the transformer and see if we can figure out about how old this bad boy is. All right, it says TF5 AP maybe, and then 9966517. 9966517. So I would think that is, or you know, late spring of 1965. Assuming that 996 is the transformer code, I think that's how you read that. And then over here on the output transformer, it is bad, but it says 94 something 6510. Sorry. Over here on the power or the output transformer, it says 6510. I apologize. I'm not sure that's going to focus well enough, but oh, see, this is interesting. So the wire coming off the output transformer was good, high quality wire, as you can see right there. And then they decided to put it on a terminal strip there, and for some reason use really crappy, super thin gauge cloth covered wire. So I'll probably replace that. And then let's look at these tube sockets. Oh, they've got that wonderful orange color or yellow color to them too. This side of the chassis is pretty good. You can see there's some drips there. That looks like maybe this was laying on its side or something. And the only one that's shielded is the input tube. There's a GE something stamp that I can only read through the camera lens. So anyway, definitely got a little bit of work involved, but mainly it's going to be cosmetic. As far as replacing of components and things, I don't really see that I'm going to need to do much. Again, apologies for this horrible camera work, but it's hard to do this with this big old cord sticking out. So anyway, there's the last shot of it. I really like it. I wonder what that stuff is. That's unappealing, I'll tell you. But certainly lots of room to work. So I think what I'm going to do is plug it in, test some voltages, and then we will evaluate the need for any components to be changed. And I guess we can take a minute here to evaluate the cabinet. This Tolex is coming up. You can see somebody again decided to use some staples because glue is just so hard to find, I guess. Most of the wood joints appear to be solid. The Tolex is dirty as would be expected. There doesn't seem to be any serious water damage. This plywood is delaminating here a little bit. Definitely some water damage on the underside. If you look here, you can see one of those joints is starting to come loose, and the Tolex is coming loose too. We'll have to probably clamp that and glue it. I think that's some genuine Colorado mud there. And then, as I said, one of the feet is missing, and that's going to have to be fixed. And if we want to look in the top here, you can see where somebody put in brand new handle and just shaved off the rivets. So if I can find a replacement handle and maybe a replacement grill logo, I think that would look pretty sharp. But I'm less worried about the cosmetics than I am the sound. First sound, then cosmetics. But looks like a lot of glue and a lot of paper towels is going to take care of most of that. Okay, one thing to keep in mind with these things is if you're used to Fender amps and Marshall amps, you're going to see a lot of different types of tubes, the pinouts on these 6AU7s, the 6C4, the 6X4 not so much, a little bit, and the 6AQ5s are quite a bit different. And so don't go around thinking that you'll just check the same pins that you always check for the screens and the grids and the plates, etc., because they will be different. So I went through here and measured with it on every important point for voltage, measured the resistor values. The only thing I really have not done is injected a signal in and evaluated it that way, because quite honestly I think it sounded pretty good. And I'm in a weird situation here, because I figured I would be definitely changing something. And I have changed the tubes, with the exception of the driver tube. Like I said, I have not looked through my loose tubes. I have a couple of piles of them that are just unmarked, and so each one of them, you really got to have a little bit of time to kill if you want to check those out. So anyway, I haven't done that yet. The other ones I did change, and what I think I am going to do, instead of changing a bunch of resistors and capacitors and things like that seem to be doing just fine, is I am going to put a speaker jack somewhere around here, probably here. I'm going to drill another hole, because I need to take the wires from that side of the chassis and put them into that jack for two reasons. One, the speaker that I have, the original speaker here, has just a slight tear in it right there, and it's right behind one of the supports for the frame. So I like the way it sounded before, so I'm not going to do anything with it, but I do want to facilitate being able to switch out speakers for recording, or for just getting another bit of sound and tone. So still debating whether or not I just want to reinforce the cord or change it, and so I'm going to drill that jack. And I have been spending a little bit of time gluing the case back or the Tolex back on, and then I think we'll be ready to do a sound check. Okay, so let's see where we are so far. I took out the kind of weird tone stack thing that was in there, which was basically a 250 picofarad capacitor and two 220K resistors all in one piece there. Sort of a early version of an integrated circuit. And I've since found the actual schematic that much more closely resembles this thing. I was using this one here, and when I found this one online, I noticed that it was correct with the 268K input resistors, and so everything else checks a little bit better as far as values and stuff. And I was also originally, I was worried that my phase inverter plate voltage was really low, but I see here that they say it's supposed to be 125, and that's pretty much exactly what I'm getting. So I'm running in about, I think it's 310 milliamps, or not milliamps, millivolts of input signal right now, 1 kilohertz, and I can get it to break up nicely. Don't have those phase inversion problems that I was experiencing before, and I was originally worried about these two coupling or interstage caps here that are feeding the plates of these 6AQ5s, but I've got about 6 millivolts on each one, and so I don't think those caps are leaking. So what I was worried about originally when I didn't have the right plate voltage was I was worried about these power caps. I was going to replace them. I do not think I will do that now. And the only thing that does concern me is this cathode resistor here is measuring about 298 volts or ohms, and it's supposed to be 270. So that's crept up about 10%, so I will replace that. Right now we got it on a nice 8 ohm load here. It's warming up a decent amount. So honestly, I don't think there's much more that I'm going to do to this thing. All I essentially did is adjust the tone stack, and it sounds much better now. I repaired the speaker, 10-inch Gibson Alnico speaker that sounds amazing. I had to repair a slight tear in the cone on it, but other than that, I'm going to button this thing up, and I think I'll play a little bit on it, and then just going to enjoy it after that. Well, guys, I have a confession to make. Last thing I said was, let's take it upstairs and see how it sounds, and that was about 3 months ago. What I did, fully intending to record it, was I brought it up and just started really listening to it critically, and I determined that, in my opinion, the input was a little too sensitive. I didn't like the way it kind of just reacted, especially with pedals. So what I decided to do was replace the power supply capacitors. And I figured as long as I'm going to do that, go ahead, measure the coupling caps. Both of them were leaking about 4 volts into the next section. And then I decided, well, as long as I'm doing that, checked all my component values on especially the signal path, and replaced everything that was out of spec, all those carbon comp resistors. So basically, by the time I did that, it was starting to get really hot in my garage, which is where I do most of my repair work, all of my repair work. And so it's basically October now, and it finally cooled down enough to where I could give it a shot. I went ahead and took care of everything and tested it, and I think it's sounding outstanding. As I said, I did replace the power supply capacitors, the coupling capacitors, probably about 6 of the resistors, mainly the ones that were in the signal path, and I also cleaned up the grounds. When I looked at this, I just assumed Gibson was, throwing these things together. I've seen on the forums a couple of pictures of other people's amps from the same era, and theirs are pristine. So something makes me think this was not the first time this thing has been worked on, and the last time it was worked on, I swear somebody just went nuts and just kind of threw it together. So I did clean up a lot of the grounds. They were just throwing grounds anywhere instead of star grounding or anything like that. So I separated my signal grounds from my power grounds where I could, and just cleaned that up generally. And also, I just really took a lot of time kind of laying things out, rerouting them, rewrapping, or twisting my filament lines and things like that. So took a little bit longer than I thought, but I mean, really nothing in parts, $20 worth of parts. So now I have about 135 into this amp is all. So we're going to put it at 10 o'clock and see if we can get coax some clean tones out of this thing. Now I think we should move it up to noon and see if we get a little bit of dirt without getting into fuzz territory. This thing gets into fuzz territory at about 1 o'clock. Might be a little bit more like fuzz right there. See how it sounds on the bridge pickup, set at noon. Sounds pretty good. But now we get into fuzz. So this is with the bridge pickup maxed out. And let's just see how it sounds. Now let's see how much it cleans up. Let's go back to 10 o'clock. We'll roll the volume down to about 5. It really cleans up at this volume. I think I could get away with playing this even at night and nobody would complain. And somebody had asked about pedals too. This thing sounds great with pedals. Rat Shaw has a great channel on YouTube, and he talks about this amp, and he says that he uses pretty much he dimes it and slams the hell out of the front end with a fuzz, and just listen to his tone when he's using it, and it sounds outstanding. So, you know, I was really surprised at how affordable these amps are. Like I said, they weren't even on my radar, and then all of a sudden I start hearing about them. And so when I saw one on Craigslist, I couldn't resist, especially since it worked. And this is far from a pristine example, but I got into it for next to nothing, and I think it sounds outstanding. I love the speaker on it. The tube complement is weird, but I like it. And, you know, they're inexpensive tubes except the 6EU7. And it's uglier than sin, so nobody's going to steal it if they break into your house. They're going to go for the Vox or something else first. So it's all great. I love it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see what Craigslist turns up next time, I guess.